Welcome back. We're glad to have you listening or watching to Curiosity, Not Judgment. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary.
I want to talk a little bit about stress today. It is something that is very present and very real in all of our lives, but there's some really good questions that we can ask and go down the journey of trying to determine, do we have stress or does stress have us?
And do we manufacture our own stress?
Ah,
And do we manufacture our own chaos and our own destruction and misery? And can we manufacture the cure to stress? Do you know what that is?
the cure to stress, I would imagine, is peace.
It's a good guess.
Is
I
that,
don't
is that
know.
the wrong answer?
I don't have the
Oh,
idea. I don't have the answer either. I was hoping you did.
Okay.
No, but I mean, we think about this. You know, is patience, is the opposite of impatience patience, right? Is the opposite. I don't know if the opposite of stress is peace. Yes. How do you feel peace? How do you feel stress? Do you feel stress all the time?
Well, let's start there because I think this is an important question and it seems to be a no-brainer, but it's not. So, do you feel stress? There are absolutely physical symptoms that begin to develop when you have stressful situations, and you can experience heart palpitations, you can experience sweating, you can experience nausea, tingling in the extremities. There's all kinds of things that can come up with stress. But there's also times when your body and your mind are under stress and you don't feel it. And I think you have some experience with that.
I just recently went through a battery of tests at Vessel Health. My friend Dr. Harvey White runs a really cool place down on 4th Street that is all about figuring out stress and HRV and heart and other stuff. It's called Vessel Health, and you know, and they run these series of tests. And I had this score where my sympathetic versus parasympathetic was like off the charts. It should be balanced, and I'm all the way on fight or flight and nothing on chill. And then it talks about physical stress, mental stress, and overall stress and stress resistance. And my score, overall score, is 37 out of 100, which is great. But my mental stress is off the charts. My physical stress is 0. And I'm thinking, I don't feel stressed. But the point is, am I in a lot of stressful situations? Yes.
Without question.
So maybe I'm just not self-aware to feel this stress, and what is that doing to me, and is there something I can do about it? So I think the curiosity, not judgment thing at first blush is, do you know when you're stressed? Do I know when I'm stressed? How do I feel when I'm stressed? What is stress to me?
Well, okay, let's go there. What is stress to you?
I don't know. And so when I started this journey a couple of years ago of trying to get in touch with my feelings and all that kind of stuff, which I thought was a little bit of a waste of time when I first started doing it, now I realize the benefits, although becoming self-aware is weird for somebody who likes to fix everything because, okay, the more I become aware of things, the more I want to fix, and I can't fix, so now what? Is it better off that I'm just not aware? Obviously, the answer is no, you'd rather know. But how do I feel stress? And I've started figuring out that when I'm anxious about something, when I encounter certain circumstances or whatever, I get a little bit of a tightness here.
Muscular. Okay.
And I don't know, was that heart? Was that neuromuscular? Is it, what is it? And so, you feel it in parts of your body if you become aware of it. So I guess the first question, like I said, is how do you feel stress? Can you become self-aware about how you feel stress? And then, is stress okay? And what do we do about stressful situations? And then when we're in stressful situations, what do we do?
I don't think I've shared this story on any of our previous podcasts, but when I was in college, I started developing this gut problem, and I will spare you all details aside from the fact that I'll share. I was down to about 2 foods that I felt like I could safely eat without having consequences. I could eat bagels and I could eat yogurt, and that was about all that I could handle. And went through the whole gamut of testing and upper GI and the whole 9 yards, right? And at one point in this journey, it wasn't a medical test and it wasn't a a diagnosis of any sort. It was a change in a relationship, and I didn't realize it for a while, but after a few weeks, like, oh, I'm feeling a whole lot better, and oh, I'm not having those symptoms anymore. And then a few months in, when I was having zero symptoms, looking back, I saw it was a relationship that I had been in that was so entangling my emotional turmoil in my body and my guts that I was a mess. And this had gone on for the better part of, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years. But it wasn't until I was removed from the situation and was able to look back that I could see it. I couldn't have told you at all in that season, oh, yes, it's this relationship that's ruining my guts.
It's an amazing story, and it makes me wonder, how in tune are we with our own stress and the causes of same?
Right, right.
How do you know when you're stressed? Do you know when you're stressed, and do you know what causes it?
Well, and there's so many symptoms of stress that make it really difficult to pin it back to, a lifestyle where you've got elevated stress. Maybe you've experienced insomnia for the last 10 years, or you've had, gut issues, you've had heart palpitations, and you begin to think, oh, it's an issue with my heart, it's an issue with my gut, it's an issue with my whatever. But it's in a time and a season when you can disconnect from the stressful environment. That's the kind of the only way that you can test that theory.
Well, it's funny. So when I was a kid, I had severe asthma, and you're right. What the way they tried to test for it was, for instance, with food, I had to get rid of all food. So I had to go on soy milk. Oh my goodness, they didn't do soy milk good when I was 10.
Oh, I can imagine.
And I was not happy, by the way, about any of this. But I had to take away all the foods, normal foods, and then reintroduce them, one at a time to see if that was the trigger. It turned out I went through all that for nothing. None of it was about food. It was about allergens like dust and weeds and things like that, which they later figured out. But the point is, how do you de-stress your life and then add in one stressor at a time,
Right.
which you may not even know is a stressor?
Exactly.
That seems like almost impossible. But then what do you do? How do you know when you're in stressful situations?
Well, so you might think, well, I'll go on vacation and I'll start there and then I'll see how I feel. But unfortunately, oftentimes, and I will say maybe more so for women than men, vacation's very stressful. There's a whole lot of planning that has to happen. You've got to figure out who's going to watch your dog, who's going to, take care of your plants. Did you pack the sunscreen? Do you have the right reservations? Are you going to be able to navigate the airport? Vacation's not as peaceful and relaxing as you might think sometimes.
New set of stressors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially these days with TSA and all this kind of stuff. It used to be, you arrive at the airport and walk on a plane 10 minutes before they close the door and you're fine. Well, for me. And that's another thing too. We have different approaches to those kinds of things.
That's right.
Now you mentioned, women versus men, but I think that's just because more women are planners than more men. But I know very many provisional thinker women, and I'm a provisional thinker. And for me, it's like, if I make it on the plane and make it to my destination, I'm a happy camper.
Doesn't matter if your luggage arrives?
I've had that situation recently, and we'll make do and we'll figure it out and we'll have fun anyway. But if you're somebody who is a planner, then every little thing that doesn't go the way you've planned it is going to be a major stressor. So, you're right. Going on vacation is a different set of stressors. So it may be even more stressful. And I've heard people say, how was your vacation? It's like, oh, I'm glad I'm back. I can rest now. So I need a vacation from my vacation.
Yeah, I've heard that one too.
But anyway, so I think there's a lot to be said about, well, first of all, we can kind of suss out if we're under stress, if we're acting in ways that we aren't necessarily happy with after the fact.
Right.
Can maybe we agree on that?
I think so.
Yeah. I'm asking because I don't know. If I'm in a situation where I'm getting defensive, I feel like I have to prove something, I feel like I'm in fear, I feel like I'm afraid of losing status or something like this, then maybe it's an indication of stress and something that I should deal with and really analyze. Why am I feeling like this? Am I really going to lose something? Am I feel like maybe it's a loss of status? Am I in competition with somebody else in the meeting? And those things are those things are really good questions to ask anyway.
Yeah.
Because why, and that's part of that self-awareness part, right? And what is the things that stress me? Why do I get stressed, et cetera, in certain situations? But I think a clue is where we were going with that is, why did I act that way in that situation? I'm surprised at how I acted.
Yeah.
I overreacted, I underreacted, I didn't care, I cared too much, I brought chaos into the situation versus peace.
Well, so let's assume we've gone through that line of questioning. We've determined that we didn't behave in a manner that we wanted to behave. And now, what are you going to do? Are you going to stress about the fact that you behaved poorly or behaved out of character or behaved in a manner that is not how you wanted to represent yourself? And are you going to perpetuate that stress by ruminating on those questions?
Possibly, but I think it's probably good to do in the long term. I've got a good friend, and he used to really kind of flip out on certain situations, and he started asking himself why that was, and he realized it was something from his childhood where he felt like he was the protector in a situation that was fairly, you could call it a safety situation. And so when he finds himself anywhere close to that kind of a situation, it's a trigger for him.
Yeah, I could see
And
that.
and he feels like he has to act, and he has to come with his full fight or flight self. And since he's realized that, now he can, prevent those situations in the beginning, and even when he's in them, can realize, ooh, I'm doing that again.
Yeah.
And this situation isn't a safety issue. It looks like it is, or it feels like it is, or it's a trigger for that, but it's really not a safety situation.
Yeah. And so I would imagine that some maybe good proactive things that we can do is, if you're on this journey of trying to self-identify pockets of stress in your life and ways in which you react in certain situations, I think we also then have to go on that journey of discovering what are some of the things that can de-escalate us and what can calm us down. And it's going to look different for everybody. So I don't know that I can necessarily generate a list of 6 or 10 things and have that check all the boxes for everyone. But I know our friend John, who's done a few episodes with us here on Curiosity Not Judgment, John Freisinger, he's a big component of interruption. So if you're stuck in a way of thinking to do something that's going to interrupt, and that may be a physical disruption, you literally get up, walk, change position, change tempo of your breathing, of your heart. It may be a breathing exercise. It may be a change of skill for a moment. Maybe you had been deeply embroiled in a Zoom meeting and you get out a coloring book. But the act of interruption to sometimes stop that just kind of madness that starts to take residence in the brain.
You lost me at coloring book, but I get what you're saying, and
Legos?
Legos is perfect.
Okay.
I love Legos, but yeah, no, I think it's a great idea, and of course the people who wrote the book PQ say, rub your fingers together, do something tactile, but breathing I find almost universally works for folks. If you can just stop and take a deep breath, by the way, which takes the time then where you can kind of analyze and think and say, okay, is my energy and my stress level rising here, and is that what I want? And if not, what can I do to kind of turn that around? At one point I made a little stress bag. I've got this little bag, and inside it's got those Chinese balls with the little clangey things inside, and I can do that. I've got a little spinner, I'm such a child, where I spin it, and can hold that.
Fidget.
It's a fidget thing. So there's certain things then, and even just the act of reaching for the bag is an acknowledgement that I probably am bringing too much energy and passion, which are superpowers of mine, but they can be misused.
Right.
Isn't most of the things that we get in trouble with is misused superpowers?
Yeah. Yeah. Like fire is a tremendous tool until it gets out of control. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, one of the breathing techniques that I know that I got trained in, and it's super easy to remember and can be implemented in basically any situation, is if you need that momentary reset, is you're going to inhale for whatever number of counts, let's say 2, 3, 4, but you exhale for double the amount that you inhaled.
I've
So
heard
if you're
this.
breathing in for 2, you're exhaling for 4, in for 3, out for 6. And it takes some concentration because it's not a natural rhythmic flow to your
Exactly,
breathing.
yeah.
And so it makes your brain stop and kind of reconfigure for a moment, and you're doing something different with your body. And so that's a really good interrupt to use.
Yeah, and one thing I've become aware of is when I am stressed, I breathe more shallow. And so just changing that into deeper breaths
Yes.
is part of it too. And the way I've heard that, which I love the doubling, out for in, is hold in the middle too, which is also different than
Yes.
we're used to.
Yes.
So, in for 2, hold for 2, out for 4.
Yeah.
Something like that. And then and the very conscious act of doing something intentionally and consciously that you usually do without thinking about it is exactly, I think that's a good way to start.
Yeah.
That will almost work for everyone, just to start and just to give yourself a little bit of a minute, recognizing and practicing that muscle of recognizing that I think I'm stressed right now.
But we started this questioning, do we always have a knowledge of when we're stressed? And sometimes we don't.
No. And sometimes there's some of us who love stress and put ourselves in stressful situations. And when it's not stressful, let's make something up, right? I mean, and it's funny because I think I do that, but I'm just becoming self-aware that I do that. And that's just weird. Why do I want to live in a situation where it's always something going on and something, happening? Don't I just like to chill out, right?
I don't know if this answers your question, but I too had a self-awareness moment, I don't know, within the last year or two, that I recognized in situations where I can't control the outcome and there's nothing practical that I can do to be part of the solution. My default was stress and worry because at least it felt like I was doing something towards the end, whatever that end may be. So,
I'm not doing nothing.
Right. So let's say some dear friends are going through a divorce process. There's nothing that I can do in this situation. And it's painful for these people that I love. And because I can't do anything practical, at least I can stress out about it because it feels like I'm doing something.
That's fascinating. No, you're exactly right. And how many of those things do we do that with? It's like, especially when we feel out of control, which,
Yep.
boy, for me, feeling out of control is probably my biggest stressor now that I think of it. Because I love to control things. I love to make sure that I want everybody to be happy. I want everything to be controlled. I want everybody just so that they create the right environment so that everybody's doing well. And when it's not like that, or I see somebody who seems to me to be actively stirring things up,
Yep.
and it's not me, I'm realizing as I say it, well then that's not good, right?
Right.
And I have a reaction and I'm stressed. So I think the not feeling in control is probably one of our biggest stressors.
So even though you might have that moment of self-awareness that, oh, I do this in these particular situations, retraining yourself to stop doing that is no small thing. And so we have to begin to ask some questions. Is there a better way?
Back to your really good visual that I go to every time of the ruts, right? Of the wagon wheel and the rut going across the plains, which is literally what happens in our brains when we start. We have too much going on in our lives to not rely on certain reactions for certain things to happen. And so we get into these patterns and ruts and it's a physical rut in our brain of how we respond to things. And retraining those into something different is difficult. Is it worth it?
Well, I think that's going to be up to each individual to answer because sometimes it's become so comfortable to live in the pain and the discomfort of the stress because it's predictable, and the fear of the unknown sometimes isn't worth it for folks because what am I going to do if I don't have this feeling all the time? Because I've become accustomed to this feeling. I know what stress and anxiety is. It's dominated my life for the last 10 years. I don't know what I would do if I'm a peaceful person, and would I be productive?
And which are good questions. And what is productivity, right? Is productivity proving that my agenda through force and bulliness the best way, or are there other approaches, right? And I think that I guess if we're doing things that don't appear to be useful, or we find that we're doing things over and over again that are just not, that just don't have good outcomes, it's probably a good place to start. Is this something where I could change my behaviors and my patterns and look at what is causing me stress in this situation? And I have another friend who always talks about, okay, well, whenever you're feeling, anxious or angry or intolerant or whatever towards some person or some situation, ask yourself, is this an old idea? Now, this person's definition of an old idea is something that actually was something that they maybe came up with when they were a kid to protect themselves, but is actually not true. So it's an old idea for him is an inaccuracy or an inaccurate idea of the way the world works.
Okay.
And so for him, it's like, is that an old idea? If that's an old idea and I can supplant it with a new idea, then it's much less effort to change.
Sure.
And so, an example isn't coming to mind right now, but that to me makes a lot of sense. If I can say, I'm anxious in this situation because I believe this, and that's probably not true, or I don't have any data to say that that's true, so maybe I should just chill on this and see how it works out without my interference.
Yeah. I was imagining the scene from one of the Indiana Jones movies. I don't remember which it is, but where you've got the little golden idol there, and he knows it's on a pressure plate, and he needs to get it off, but he has to, simultaneously swoop in the bag of sand that has the same weight. And, kind of comically, it's like that sometimes, right? We're on this pressure plate. We've got this golden idol of stress and worry and anxiety. And we know that we need to replace it with something else, but it's finding what that something else is and making sure it holds equal weight and value in our kind of system so that we don't set off the cataclysm of, the whole temple falling down around us.
It's super wise because you're right. Nature and ourselves abhors a vacuum. You can't just stop doing something.
Right.
You have to replace it with something else. Of equal weight and value. A bag of sand isn't necessarily value, but equal weight in the situation. I think that that's a really wise comment, because if we don't replace it with something else, there's no motivation that the next time it's just not going to revert back to that.
That's right. Man, I feel like we've asked 1,000 questions during this, brief little episode, but really that's what this is about, is to begin to ask questions that cause you to take a pause and evaluate where you're at. And so we started with the question, do you have stress, or does stress have you? And so hopefully some of this narrative has really given you pause to consider where you're at in your own space, the stressful triggers in your life, and where you ultimately want to go, and how do you begin the process of transplanting some of those behaviors surrounding stress and anxiety with those of peace and rest, and looking for a better outcome in the future.
And what can we do to become more self-aware of what stress is for us, and how we can be more useful by identifying that stress in given situations and preempting it or substituting it out with behaviors that add more peace and serenity and synergy in the situation versus chaos and other stuff.
Yeah. All right, so we'll leave you with all of those many questions and considerations as you evaluate stress in your life. We'll wish you a great week, and we'll see you again right back here on Curiosity, Not Judgment. Don't forget, you can pick this up on a number of different podcast platforms, and of course, we've got the YouTube channel. We always love it if you want to leave a comment and give some feedback on what you're thinking or what you're experiencing, or even ideas for future shows. So thanks again for watching.
Take care.